I wrote a joke about pooping today.
I think I probably did too, actually. Actually, now that I think about it, I did also. So that's probably...
I was like, wow, that sounds way cooler than what I did today.
I haven't done that in a little while. In a hot minute, so
how you been, man?
Been good.
I saw you went on some like retreat or something. It was like you got with a group of people.
It was probably one of the best experiences of my life.
We'll bring that up here.
Yeah, it was really cool. We're doing it again in Peru this year and again in Joshua Tree in October.
Yeah. I'm hearing more and more of those where people get together. Either they do like the ayahuasca trips down in South America, or just getting together for like business strategy. You get together with a bunch of people that really want to push themselves.
Like
in whatever context.
Stuff. It was really a cool experience. Like it was a culmination of a whole bunch of different things that I really wanted to create, as far as like just creating a container for people to remember who they are. You know, when they don't have all of these other imprints from society and everybody's like looking at them and saying, I want to feel good when I'm looking at you, so I want you to do the things I want you to do. Stop being selfish. And so they have all these imprints on who they're supposed to be. Yeah. And so this opportunity we did microdoses of mushrooms every day. I did Bufo. I was guiding people through Bufo ceremonies and different things, which is like 5-MeO, DMT, and some other stuff. And
you were guiding it.
Yeah. So I did some shamanic work through that. So I did 12 ceremonies in one day. I was like, my portals were wide open that day for sure. Yeah. It was pretty crazy. It was crazy. But it was a lot of fun. And just a really neat, like just the environment itself and just the way that we had established it, because I'd done it with some other guys from all over the world and just had helped them facilitate the whole experience. So, they had almost no plan, and it ended up being one of the coolest trips that I've ever been on. We were in Joshua Tree, right outside of it, in the middle of nowhere. Really? Just the night sky was something that I have never seen anywhere in my life, because you see the Milky Way and all the colors, and because you're literally 30 miles, like when you're in the park, you're 30 miles from the closest Wi-Fi or cell phone signal. So it is like when you're out there, it is a different kind of stillness. Yeah. And it's just fascinating, because you get into the whole point. It was called the Emptiness Project. And so it was about finding that emptiness and that stillness, so that you have kind of that beacon to go back to when you're back in the busy chaos of your real life.
Marcus is doing something like that. He's spending like 7 days in a cave or something like that.
Oh yeah, he's doing a darkness retreat. I saw that.
That was like, man, because I definitely want to do the 10-day silent meditation. That's something that I feel like I owe to myself. And then I saw the darkness thing. I was like, yo, that's some next level shit.
Like, I was called to do that last year. I didn't end up doing it, and then every once in a while it chirps in my ear about it again. To do it, but it's really pretty neat. So after 5 days of darkness, because what happens when you're in darkness that long, your body starts producing a tremendous amount of melatonin. So the first couple of days you end up sleeping a lot, because your body can't figure out what's way is up.
Okay. Because of the darkness.
Yeah, and then after 5 days, so melatonin.
Do you take vitamin D supplements at all? Or
I don't either. No, you can't supplement vitamin D.
You can't?
No, because it's non-polarized. And the vitamin D that's created in our skin from the sun is polarized. So they're completely different chemicals.
Oh, okay.
But it's really interesting. So after 5 days, after a chain of events and things that happen from that melatonin molecule being up-leveled, your body starts producing DMT on its own. And so you start to be in pitch black, but seeing it, like whether your eyes are closed or open, in perfect daylight. So you start to see all the spirits and other stuff that are always around everybody. So it basically opens that portal up for that period of time while you're in darkness. And so people get a lot of part of the reason that it's, the initial part is challenging for people, because you're in silence and you're in darkness and there's nothing to do, and so you kind of go stir crazy initially, I think. But
I mean, it's like when you're a kid and you're afraid of the dark and you kind of see something, right? Is that kind of along the same path?
Well, I think it probably is, if people don't know to surrender. I think a lot of people don't realize that when there's those types of entities and other things that are there, and you see them for the first time, or you're experiencing them without seeing them, because a lot of people have them in their homes all the time, they don't even realize it. They don't realize they can ask. and say, hey, are you here for my highest good? And if they're not, they have to leave. And they do 100% of the time if you ask.
To leave.
Yeah, and it's crazy that you literally just say,
and you've seen these spirits?
Yeah. So you can see, I mean, I sense them all the time. Like I can tell where they are in the room and all kinds of stuff. When I'm not on the medicine, I don't see a physical entity because they're energies.
What do we got going on here?
What?
Oh. What do we got going on here?
I'll let you know.
Did you guys start recording?
We're recording audio right now, but I don't
all right, let's start. Yeah, we can get into all this, dude. This is gonna be
I'm saying
fun.
what do we got going on in the room?
Oh, well, I'll let you know as I see what happens. Because it's not something I usually look for. It's something like I'll sense and like, oh, something's in here, and then I'll be able to track it down.
I think we got some kinksters in here.
You wouldn't be surprised.
It would very, very sexual energy.
I would imagine that just being a ghost is just you're kind of horny all the time anyway, right?
They're watching you naked and do stuff all the time anyway.
That's not gonna make them horny.
Or they probably don't care.
Yeah. Why would you even be in this realm if it ain't coming to see some shit, you know?
Yeah.
Like, why even?
That's the reason we leave this realm.
Yeah. We want to see some shit.
You beach or something if you're trying to see some pretty stuff.
Maybe they don't have Dominican women in that dimension, and they're like, I need to go see some bad bitches right now.
Yeah, that's funny. That's got to be what they think, though. Half the time. They're actually. It's funny you say that because they do. One thing I've noticed consistently with most of the spirits that I've ever just had conversations with, whether it's on medicine or just in general with like my guides and whatever, they're hilarious. They're hilarious. Like they have a great sense of humor. They will like make fun of you for every little stupid thing. But with like the most, like your guides, they make fun of you and they make jokes and it's hilarious, but it comes off with such abundant like gentleness and love at the same time. It's just distinct in the way that they communicate.
I could see that because I mean, if you're haunting someone, they're probably doing it because it's funny to them to watch someone like, oh my god,
and then like if
that person snaps psychologically from seeing a ghost, then it's like. That could be even funnier to them. I don't know.
They know that it's all a catalyst. You know, like one of the things I'll probably end up talking about is that, we have this lens of preference that we look through everything that happens to us. And just because it's not our preference doesn't make it bad. And so as we start to shift a lot of those different lenses by learning the soul lessons and things that we're here to learn, you start to translate those different catalysts a little bit differently. So when you see somebody who's in pain and they're wanting to be rescued from that pain, you also realize that pain is a catalyst for them to learn a certain lesson they haven't learned yet. And if I come in and I take that pain away, it's like having somebody who has spent the last 3 weeks painting a beautiful mural, and I come in and I finish it.
Okay.
And not only that, it's the other piece that they still have to learn the lesson.
Yeah.
And that energy and that pain and stuff is just going to keep coming back with other mirrors and other people channeling it back to them. So me saving them temporarily is actually hurting them more than helping them. So there's other ways to approach those kinds of interactions to show compassion for what they're going through and for what is true for them, which is the pain that they're in.
Yeah.
Without you taking their power away, or without you giving your power away by trying to rescue and
it's doing the right thing. It's like you know when you're enabling or when you're helping. If you have a decent compass, you can tell.
Mm-hmm.
Some people just don't want to see that they're because that sometimes that enablement for them is like if it makes them feel good because they're feeling needed.
It's temporary. But
Welcome to FredTalk, where if you're not learning, hopefully you're laughing.
Yeah. All right, guys. Fucking welcome to FredTalk. We hit the ground running. we hit the ground running, but before we start, I am wearing my work clothes. These are my scrubs, people. Yeah, but sometimes this is what you get. I didn't have time to run home.
These are my work clothes too, for whatever that's worth. But
your work clothes are way cooler than mine. I got these scrubs from this company. I'm just gonna say the name because they're not paying me anything, but it's like for anybody who's in healthcare and wants to look stylish. This company, Figs, has some really cool and comfy scrubs. I think it's a little... I'm thinking about it, just like stylish scrubs to me is kind of weird. Like, imagine, what is it? The surgeon going to look nice, and then fucking the person on the bed's going to like, yo, bro, you're crushing it right now. You're looking sleek, dog. Right? Or what if you had a black patient on the stretcher and he like takes off the mask and he's like, ooh, okay, I see you. Like, I don't know what this company, what their goal is, but if you want to look good while working in healthcare, go to Figs. And that's the last time I'm going to say their name because they ain't paying me for this shit. So, guys, welcome to FredTalk. I'm here with Ryan. We're going to fucking go. We're going to get deep and weird on this one. So, Ryan, what's up, dog?
What's going on, man?
Dude,
it's super fun to be here.
Stuck the landing, dude. White dude's like killing it with the clap.
We only practiced 300 times. But we had to get the timing right.
So, bro, we linked up last year, and because of my disorganization, this is finally when we get to do the podcast. But you said it came at a good time because you just changed the message. Tell me a little bit about that.
Gosh, it's funny. Like I say, I just changed my message, but part of the game is that it's always evolving. And so last year when you worked with me, I was doing some movement stuff. I was helping you with some physical stuff that was going on, whether it's aches and pains and helping movement dysfunction. Yep. We did a little bit of color, I think, at the time, too.
Yeah, the coloring stuff was interesting.
And so I'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. And so what's happened is it's not so much that I've let go of the old identity entirely. It's that I've realized there's bigger pieces to the puzzle. So if I'm looking at somebody and they come to me with lower back pain, or they're coming to me with hip pain, or something of that nature, some kind of physical dysfunction, I'm realizing the more I've done some of the work that I'll talk about a little bit later, that's only a small breadcrumb of the puzzle. It's only a small piece of it. And so what that means is that if I'm not looking at the underlying psychological and even spiritual causes, I'm actually not fixing the underlying thing and helping people to the extent that I'm really wanting to help people. Yeah. And so what I found is that it's not just movement. It's not just the color stuff that I do. And I'll talk more specifically about what that actually is. But it's not the individual pieces, but how I've woven them together to be a stronger catalyst to help people wake up. And what that means is we're here to learn soul lessons. And so each time we incarnate, we chose our parents. We chose certain contracts to sign so that people show up in our life to traumatize us in the perfect way, such that we learn lessons around those traumas.
Why? So why are we doing that? Why do you think we're doing that to ourselves?
So I don't think we're doing that to ourselves. I think we're doing it for ourselves. And so part of what's happening is we've been doing this for a long time. So we've been working on these same lessons for the last 50 plus lifetimes. And so we're here to this is a bigger story than I can really explain in a short sentence.
Are you saying that we are the creators in our game of life? From like a past life?
Even beyond that. So when we incarnate here, there's a period of time in a space called the Bardo space. And this is in it might be Buddhism. I'm trying to think of where Bardo originated. Not important. Bardo basically means the space between the islands. And so what happens in this space before we actually leave our mother's womb is we program and sign contracts for all the experiences and lessons that we intend to have when we incarnate. And that means creating our natal birth chart. That includes all the different details of all of those different kind of woo-woo things that people talk about. Yeah. And so what's happened here is we sign our contracts with our parents, and we agree. So stepping back a little bit, we choose our parents. And so when we choose our parents, we choose them for specific lessons, both for them to learn and for us to learn, for us to grow spiritually. Okay. So many people here who talk about evolution are always talking about physical evolution. But what I've discovered through a lot of the work that I've done is it's actually a spiritual evolution that drives the physical evolutions and changes in the way that the world is changing. And I'm sure that if you've kind of paid a little bit of attention over the last year, people's lives are just turning over and changing, and the way that they're interacting is changing. Yeah. And we're seeing people wake up and have an awareness of things that they didn't even know they could have an awareness of. And so now people are realizing, oh, there's a me, and there's an identity, which is ego, if you want to call it that. Yeah. And then there's just all of this other programming on top of me and my ego. And like now people are realizing, stuff. And I'll talk more in detail on how that shows up for people. But part of what happens is while we're in our mother's womb, every emotion, every trauma, every experience that she has is imprinted on you subconsciously. So when she is told she's not good enough, when she is having various birth complications, all of those things get imprinted on you subconsciously and play themselves out in your relationships and in your interactions and in a lot of different ways. And when those are not learned, they create a stasis in our body. And that stasis is a lack of flow of a certain kind of energy. And when that builds up and isn't moving correctly, you start to have pain, you start to have movement dysfunction, you start to have tissue dehydration, and all of that then leads to the physical signs of what was originally a spiritual imprint.
So it's like when someone's anxious, like people tend to like tense up a little bit more. They kind of manifest
A huge part of that. So like what people don't understand even just about anxiety is information. So we're constantly getting information coming down through us from, you can say, the quantum field, wherever you want to do.
Yeah.
We're always connected to that. We just don't always translate it. And so what happens is there's effectively, if you want to map it out, you have 12 different dimensions. And so the first through fourth dimension are the physical reality that we live in.
Okay.
The fifth through eighth dimension are the information and organization space.
Okay.
And then the ninth through 12th are the quantum field or hyperspace or the vortex, whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
Right? And so all information is in hyperspace. And we're constantly getting quantum photons that are coming through us through ideas and through insights and just whatever is coming into our head, that stuff is pouring in all the time.
Okay.
When that information doesn't properly pass
That's consciousness, essentially.
Exactly.
Like that's like, we don't control our thoughts.
They're just coming through.
They just come in and we can react to them, we can observe them. That's okay,
exactly. Yeah. And so what happens is when that doesn't pass through the information organization space, instead of that showing up as regulated or translated information, it shows up as chaos. And so you have all of these people who have dysregulation in our system that is causing all this information to show up as chaos, and that's anxiety. Because we're getting multiple timelines of information showing up at the same time, and we can't translate that.
It's like the past trauma affects that middle zone so that it doesn't function properly, essentially. Yeah,
so technically how that works, so I may have explained this to you at one point, but our cells use light to communicate. And so different spectrums of light are going to cause a warping on the tension of the cell membrane. And based on that warping, it's going to tell the DNA what hormones, proteins, enzymes to produce at different times of day. The way that works is the water around our cells is made up of oxygen and hydrogen. The hydrogen bonds between the oxygen and hydrogen, the bonds between them, are sensitive to both light and magnetic fields. So when you expose those bonds to light of different frequencies, it causes those hydrogen bonds to vibrate in any of 6 different ways. Hydrogen and oxygen are diamagnetic because oxygen is negative, hydrogen is positive.
Okay.
So when you expose that to a magnetic field, it orients those water molecules.
Okay.
So when you expose that water molecule to various frequencies of light, and you have the magnetic field generated by the mitochondria in the cell, you just created a 3D resonant structure around the cell.
Okay.
That is then matched by the hydrogen bonds inside the DNA that are winding.
Okay.
And so now you have this communication network that can happen that says, here's input information, translate it, here's the types of stuff of work that you need to do in the cell. Now, when we have trauma, when we have all of these different imprints, these are imprinted on the structure of water around our cells. And that changes our hormonal output. It then is effectively the lens through which we perceive life. So if we have all of these imprints, if we have EMF, if we have toxins that are dehydrating our cells, all of this changes how our cells can input and translate that information. That creates a dysregulation that alters how those quantum photons can be translated. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's kind of one of those things that allows, when we look at that narrative and we start to see people with anxiety and we start to see all these different diseases, and then we look at it as a light arrhythmia problem as opposed to a disease or a mental illness or any of these kinds of things, we realize that all of these behaviors are anchored in trauma imprints that are imprinted around our cells. And our cells communicate faster than the speed of light. So what's happening is we have information that comes in.
Hold on, this light therapy, is it like peer reviewed? Is it scientific, or is this kind of like we're treading into the waters of like, you know, we're having fun with explaining how traumas manifest themselves
So
in reality.
Peter Mandel is the guy who created the original color puncture. So I haven't mentioned the word. It's color puncture that I do. So it's acupuncture with light. And Peter Mandel's a German guy. He's been doing this for like 50 or 60 years now. I don't personally know off the top of my head what the peer-reviewed research is. I know that he has done a tremendous amount of work and research on photobiomodulation with Fritz Popp, and a whole list of other people that have been researched that I can certainly dig out if people want to know that. But he's done it. He's basically got 1,000 different treatments of all kinds of different things that you can do with this color puncture type stuff. And I use it a little bit unconventionally, because a lot of times when people go in for a color puncture treatment, they're doing it to feel better. And I'm usually helping people with consciousness expansion. So I'm not always working with somebody who hates their life and wants to have a quick fix somewhere.
Yeah.
What I'm doing is, I'll just talk about one of those stronger treatments that I do with people. These treatments can dig out the karma that has been imprinted the first 25 years of someone's life.
Like ayahuasca, something like that?
Even more powerful than ayahuasca.
Really?
Like I've done now 68 ayahuasca ceremonies plus Bufo and a whole bunch of different things. And
You've conducted them?
I have participated and conducted the Bufo ceremonies and different things.
You're a shaman, right? You consider yourself a shaman.
I guess I could. Yeah. I don't think of it that way, but I guess I could call myself that.
Yeah, because you guide people or whatever. This is awesome, man. You're a very new and interesting guest for me. And this is like fun for me to like. Yeah, because as you're explaining it, I feel like, I see what you're seeing, but in a different way. So I find it interesting to see.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that I find is that when I present it, it's a huge paradigm shift for people. Because the stuff that I have uncovered through doing these more provocative color puncture treatments, plus the ayahuasca and Bufo stuff that I've literally used color to know what my intention should be.
What's a provocative color puncture treatment? Because that sounds...
So the transmitters that I was just talking about is a really provocative treatment. And what happens is as you treat... So the one I'm talking about is called the memory relay, and it's on your head.
Yeah.
And there's 8 different circles, and you treat, in each circle basically digs deeper into different layers of programming. And so each time you do these treatments, you test age points. And like for me, for example, my age 3 point kept showing up on all of the different circles. And what I find is when I do these treatments, the thing that was imprinted, so if I was bullied growing up, or if I had a damsel in distress story where I was always betraying myself in order to avoid betraying the person I was with.
Yeah.
Or I had imposter syndrome because I was afraid of people judging me or not liking me if I showed up fully.
Yeah.
And all of those different things are from imprints that occurred the first 25 years of my life. And so when I do this treatment, people would come out of the woodwork to trigger every one of those lessons in different ways, depending on the age points that I did distinctly, and I'd see it.
How did you come across even like knowing about color puncture?
It fell in my lap. I was teaching gymnastics inspired fitness class.
Okay.
And one of the people who was coming into the class had been taking it for a couple of weeks. I had helped her shoulders and neck and those kinds of things, and she ended up doing some private lessons with me for about a month and said, "Hey, I do this thing called color. Would you be interested in trying it?" And I said, "Heck yeah." And the first treatment we ever did was a prenatal treatment. And one of the prenatal wounds I had was that damsel in distress story.
Yeah.
And so what happened was I got that treatment, and not literally, like as I was walking into my car, my mom called. Bawling her eyes out, wanting me to rescue her from what she was feeling. Like literally point for point, the thing that I thought I was going to be working on with that treatment. And just bawling her eyes out, trying to get me to rescue it. And I recognized it immediately, because normally I would have gone in and coddled and tried to fix it. And so I immediately recognized and was able to uphold new boundaries around it and say, wait, this isn't my work. I don't need to rescue you from this.
Yeah.
She didn't even remember it the next day. And not only that program, that paradigm where like the girl I was dating at the time and some different people that were coming into my life were also triggering some of those things. And soon as I made that new decision interacting with my mom on the phone that day, it disappeared from my life entirely. like incredibly so, to the point where I was like, I need to do more of this. How do I? And so we ended up. So it was like it made such a huge shift in my life just from that one. Like it was an early treatment.
So for somebody watching this right now and they're thinking, this dude is fucking nuts, what do you say to them? Because to someone who's not even thinking about really consciousness like that, but they listen to the show, they come across this, they're probably like, whoa, what's going on here? He's talking about, accessing quantum realms and this and that. Like, what do you say to those people? Like to people like reacting like that?
Sure. So I tend to change my language based on who I'm talking to, in terms of not so much filtering myself, but translating it in a way that they can receive and understand. Otherwise, I'm not.
I think that's important. That's a nuance a lot of people I think don't get. They think that maybe
their words are the ones that need to be said. And there's truth to that. Because, for example, if someone's traumatized and they come to me to help them, if I speak their language to help them through that trauma, it won't work. If their language worked, they wouldn't need me to help them with my language. But when I'm teaching somebody a concept, and depending on how many steps away they are from the words I want to use, I need to bridge that gap somehow by speaking a language that they can relate to.
Yeah.
So I start talking about, I'll dig into, I'll just have a conversation with them about just, what was their parents' relationship like? And then we'll start to dig into what those programs are. And they were like, well, I had a really good childhood. I had, my dad was pretty loving. He was around. We did things. My mom was this. And I was like, well, how did they show love to each other? And blah, blah, blah. And so we'd start to paint that picture. And then they'd be like, okay, well, my dad was a little bit standoffish. He was, he wasn't super affectionate, or, they never really showed it in front of me, or, whatever the dynamic was for them. And then I'm like, well, do you do such and such in your relationships now? Do you hide from this in your relationships now? That was from this imprint. And then I start to paint that thread for them. Yeah. And so they start to see, oh, I see how that's connected. And oh, now I see that through all of my other relationships. And so they can start to...
You strip mine your life and you pick up patterns. You're like, okay, this,
And so what I show them first is you are not this pattern in your relationship. So if someone's struggling in their relationship some way, and they're having boundary violation, or they're having arguments all the time, and their agreements between the two of them are not clear, then part of that game is not only to help them clarify those agreements, but also to help them reflect on the parts of their story along the way that are narrative, that are not necessarily true. Because we can tell 100 different stories about the same thing. And a lot of times people choose to tell the story that gives their power away, as opposed to gives them more power to be able to interact with the reality.
So you're giving them the methods to kind of ground themselves. Because Because if you can give them, because a story helps with like giving you kind of like a sense of direction moving forward, especially if you can bring your past together. Am I in the right path?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. Yeah. So, I mean, the idea, that's initially. So kind of the idea here is I want to show them, even at the most surface level, that the patterns that they're experiencing, whether it's in their career or it's in their life, or they don't know what their life purpose is, they don't feel fulfilled, whatever it is, I first show them that that's a story. And I want to show them that it's a story because I want to give them the power to realize that they can choose any story they want to tell from whatever identity that they're creating. Because their ego or their identity is basically just the marker or the beacon from which they create their reality. And so many people are like, oh, we have to do away from the, all this new age stuff is we have to be separate from our ego, and we have to, like, anything that's egoic is wrong. It's like, no, ego is just our identity, and it's going to create a new marking point wherever we end up.
Yeah.
And so part of what I do is I help people give themselves permission to feel what they're feeling and to be experiencing what they're experiencing, and permission to want what they want. Because so often we want things that we feel are taboo, or we judge ourselves for what we really want, instead of just because we want it doesn't mean we need to act on it. But if we're constantly saying don't want that, all we're going to do is build energy into that desire.
I mean, I would say that for comedy, that's what it was for me. I used to see comedians like, well, I could never do that. Even though I've always been told I was funny. Why would I not be like, maybe I can't, at least say maybe I can? I was literally like, oh, you got to know someone. That's just not my thing. And then all of a sudden, like, now I just ended up here anyway.
Yep.
And now I'm like, why did it take me so long? You know, like,
well, it's imposter syndrome. And I was talking to a couple of folks earlier today about that same thing where, you know, they don't feel, they want someone outside of them to give them the validation so that they can have permission to show up.
Yeah. Oh,
and,
man.
And so,
yeah.
and it's like, the thing I tell people is like, you're the only one who gives you permission. You're the only one who declares that you're the expert, or you're the comedian, or you're the guy that people can go to for this type of advice.
Yeah.
And nobody else validates you that way. And even if they did, you wouldn't hear it until you yourself step into that identity. And so often we're trying to wait for all of this other validation. We're trying to wait for all these other pieces. And instead of us just stepping up into that, we are constantly effectively, the way I usually describe it is we're using something outside of us as our source. And the universe is designed to betray us when we do that. So, and it always will. So we'll be like, well, I want to be a comedian, but I need somebody to set it up for me and have all these things on a silver platter before I even begin to tell people funny jokes, right? Or stories that create humor. And, you know, and so being able to recognize that you're sitting in that and you're waiting for someone to rescue you or give you that opportunity to show up is going to put you in a position where you're waiting, right? And you just keep waiting. And then what happened when you finally decided, you know what, I'm going to try this. I'm going to tell my friends jokes, or I'm going to tell my friends this story. And then you just let it scale up because you're showing up in the identity of this type of comedian. And then the universe supports you in it.
You talk about waiting too. I feel like maybe there's some people that have done this. I've done this before, is where you know you should be doing something, you don't do it, and then you hear about a story about someone that did it later in life, like older than you are, and you're like, I have a little bit more time. I'll procrastinate another day.
I know that, you know, the funny, and it's so true because we're always on everyone else's timeline until we're not.
Until it's too late. If you wait too long, then eventually you're like, oh, fuck, now it's too late. You start to...
Well, and you get in that, then that's another story. And that's another thing that I try to point out to people is your timeline is perfect.
Yes.
You know, and you are like, where you are right now is exactly where you are. You have absolutely all the wisdom, all the tools, all the resources to be successful where you are today. That may not be where you are aiming for tomorrow. But if you are constantly saying, I'm not enough for tomorrow, you also will miss out on the creative potential of what you can do today. Yeah, and so if you show up today and you're in the idea that you are enough today, that will bring in more so that when you show up tomorrow, you're also enough for tomorrow. Because if you weren't enough as you are in what you're doing right now with whatever your message is, whatever your medicine is, you wouldn't be here, right? You'd be somewhere else because you'd be enough in that position.
Yeah.
And that's important to realize. And
what's your medicine?
So part of what I do with people, I have a group mentorship that I do now that people subscribe to. And so every week I do 2 mentorship calls that we do. And then they have programs and a group coaching environment that we go through. And so this like literally just started at the beginning of the year. I've got a whole bunch of stuff that I do, but this is the newest of the things that I do. And so what we started with was relationships the first week. And in that chat, and this is a free one, so people can go right to my website to watch this one to see how that interaction works and how I work with people and all of that. And so what we do...
What's the website?
It would be, the best way to find me is probably on Instagram. Okay. So find me at Mintzflow, MINTZFLOW. Okay. And then my links will link you directly to a lot of this stuff just in my bio. It's move.mintzflow.com for my main website, but there's a lot of stuff to look at. It's probably better to catch me on Instagram with some of the stuff that I deliver. The thing that I do with people on that. So the first week I talked about relationships. The second week I talked about money. And what I dig into for people is the first one was talking about where are our relationship patterns programmed? Where do those subconscious imprints start? And how do they show up in your relationships? And then how do you, once you start to recognize those patterns, what can you do to start to shift that dynamic so that you can both level up in your relationships and have stronger agreements and be able to interact in a more a way that's not betraying yourself, but also being able to honor have it creating a safe container for you to express and whatever else within that. And so we dug into a whole bunch of different types of programming and things that happened. My parents were actually there, so I threw them under the bus plenty of times. No, like I've done a lot of this work with them. They've done a couple of ayahuasca ceremonies with me.
Oh, that's cool.
So I have that kind of healing and blessing that's come to me also. And
have they always been okay with you doing that?
They were okay with me doing it. It took me 2 years of doing it before, and me just showing up more and more.
And they're like, "What's this energy? How'd you get that?"
Yeah,
and that's you. I could see that.
And that's exactly what I tell people. I was like, never try to tell somebody about it. Just show up, and eventually they'll ask you how.
Yeah.
And that's what because that's way less painful also when you think about it. And being able to navigate that with my parents was really, really powerful. And there's been plenty of other strange catalysts and things that have showed up both through the color treatments that I've done and
what's
whatever
been
else.
The strangest catalyst?
This is an interesting one. So it was an ayahuasca ceremony this past year. And my mom and dad were both there. I was there with a couple of friends I had actually invited, had like opened that door to. It was an interesting ceremony to begin with because the circle had a lot of anxiety. I do a lot of ceremony down in Miami, so I have a circle that I sit with all the time down in Miami, and
Miami seems like an anxious place.
There was a lot of
cocaine and everything.
It was just the land. Like originally, it's a beautiful piece of land in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
There's roosters everywhere that like dance to the music. It's crazy.
I think those are
stuff
just
that
Cuban
happens.
people.
It's kind of what they seem like. They are feisty as can be. But they. So anyway, long story short. So I was. There's a fire in the center. We're all around the outside, like pretty close together. Well. Beginning of the ceremony is fine. And then about maybe a third of the way through, maybe halfway through the night, my mom was cuddling with a completely different man and making out with him.
Whoa.
Right, literally, like closer than you are on the couch.
Is this happening in reality?
In reality.
And your dad was there?
Yeah, he was right here, and my mom, he ended up moving because they were both next to each other and noticed it. And, he's a very forgiving person to begin with. And, there's some wounds that I've been working with him through to heal that.
Yeah.
But she was literally right next to me. Not only that, but they were making out, they were talking, and I kept having to be like, stop talking. This is a silent ceremony. And it was just it put me into a position where I had to see my mom as another human, not as my mom. Because I had to look at her and say, you're another human learning these same soul lessons that I am. And if I'm looking at you in a way that I prefer you to behave, then I'm also not healing the underlying wound that you're triggering for me right now. And so it was very challenging to have my mother, right? Because that's not the agreement that my parents have.
Okay,
that's not the way that they behave. That's not anything that is above board. And so it was.
Holy shit! Yeah.
It was something that I was really upset with her at the time because it was a huge I had brought them into my family, this circle that I had cultivated and built the relationships with and. That's how she treated it. And so there was that catalyst that showed up where I had to realize that I was like, wait, I need to stop trying to get my mom to give me the nurturing that I should be giving myself. And so it was a really healing turn of events that, it created some contrast for a little bit, but we were able to heal from it. And now it has changed the way that I can interact with my parents. Very
good way or bad way?
Good way. I have a great relationship with
them
because now I can see them as humans instead of my parents and can interact and help them without needing to filter myself so that they feel good when they look at me. And me showing them that has allowed them also to step up in a much better way and change what they're doing and have this huge upheaval in their lives that has caused them to get on a track that is more in alignment for them. Not that they were, my mom was out of alignment, but there's a lot of ways that has been a really powerful catalyst for everybody to gain greater self-awareness and all of those pieces.
I agree because I think that in itself, that theme at a higher level, realizing that your parents are just human beings is a point of I think growing up. Mm-hmm. It may not occur itself the way your situation was fucking nuts, but maybe it's something as you set boundaries and your parents don't like it because they're used to contacting you at a certain,
exactly.
you know, when things like that, which I'm going through now myself.
Yeah.
But you start to go, oh, damn, like this, my mom went through some shit. This is how she communicates or lack of communicate. I got to be patient and we're going to get through this at some point.
Exactly.
You know,
so that's exactly what I'm talking about, the prenatal wounds and some of these things that I treat with color.
Yeah.
And so when I work with somebody on color that way,
like
my mom comes up.
My mom was being physically abused when I was in the womb.
Okay.
So you talk about, every time someone talks about, oh, you're imprinting or whatever, or trauma in the womb, I'm like, oh shit, man, I was a fucking punching bag at one point.
Well, did you have relationships in your life that were not necessarily abusive physically, but maybe had more aggression in them, or maybe you were afraid of stepping up in the way that you wanted because you didn't want to be ridiculed for it?
I've dated women that just treated me objectively like shit to the point where like I was in the relationship, knew I was being treated like shit, and it was just like, so I would just look at my friends like, this is me. So
this is awesome. So the beauty of that is consciously, when you look at that behavior and that interaction, you're like, that's not how I would ever want to be treated or want my friends to be treated. Or that's not love. But subconsciously, that feels like home to you. Yeah. Right? So you are aware consciously, logically, that that's not how I should be treated. But subconsciously, that behavior speaks love to you, and you don't know any different until you start to realize and reprogram that. Yeah, and
that's now I know what I don't want. So now it's like, if I rewind time, would I want to change anything? Not really, because I needed that to know what I don't fucking what I don't want now.
And the cool thing about that, not only is that you gain that insight on what you don't want, so you can show up brighter and you can actually say, hey, this is what I want, and I'm willing to say no to the things that are not it.
Yeah.
But you also then can say, oh, now I recognize when I was in my mom's womb and she was treated this way. And there's probably a bunch of stuff in there and little details of things that are in there. Now I can see, oh, that's why I was treated that way in my different relationships. Those are imprints. Those are programs that I can actually uninstall.
Yeah.
And when I uninstall those programs, now I can show up way better. Now, like those people who would even think to treat me that way don't even show up in my life anymore.
Yeah, because you don't even,
because you don't have that energetic output.
Yeah.
You know, the people who show up in our lives are just channels of our consciousness back to us. So we, you know, if I'm interacting with somebody and I need something well, let's talk money, because money is a good example of this, because there's a lot of money programming that shows up for people and how they navigate the energy of money.
That one's easy too, because it is like literally, like money is like it can be used for like the superficial reasons. So it'll bring people, if you wear a certain type of clothing, you start attracting people that also like that clothing, and they may not be, you know,
right.
If that's all they're focused on, then there's going to be
exactly. And so there's pieces of it that are interesting, because, you know, when you think about your relationships, people think, oh, well, if I think about what I want, if I envision it in my head, I'll get what I'm thinking about. That's not how the universe creates. The universe creates through our subconscious output, not our conscious output. When we clear the subconscious and we do that cleaning process, whether it's ayahuasca or it's color puncture or it's both, or it's all these different modalities that you can use to heal those wounds, the subconscious output clarifies and aligns with what your conscious output is. But it's still the subconscious energy that is creating and coming back to you. And so it's when we start to look at it that way and we see the relationships that come into our life and we start to take ownership, it's like, oh, they're treating me this way and I don't like that. What am I outputting that's causing them to bring that back to me, to show me something that I'm judging, or that I feel shame around, or that I'm always keeping one foot out the door because I'm afraid of committing to this because I'm afraid of getting stuck in a less than ideal situation, or I'm afraid of committing to this because of these fears and these insecurities that are chirping in my ear that I haven't actually acknowledged yet. I haven't given myself permission to be afraid. You know, it's like I'm sitting in this relationship afraid to commit to that next level, and everyone's telling me I'm not allowed to be afraid of this. And it's like, no, you should be afraid of this. You are afraid of it. Yeah. So if you are afraid of it, give yourself permission to be afraid of it. And then once you do that, balance the narrative with an equally powerful truth. So when you're afraid of, going back to the money thing, when I have a client coming to me, we are just couriers of money energy. And so if I am wanting to charge $1 million for my services, if I stop someone from paying me that because maybe I think they can't afford it, I have actually blocked off the movement of that energy and also taken that person's power away to empower them to use that financial exchange as a catalyst.
So if somebody wanted to Venmo you $1 million for this podcast, you'd be like, I accept.
Absolutely. Because
nice.
I
fucking love that, dude.
Well, part of it is, so it's interesting the way that I look at it, because
I love that.
I realize that any money coming to me is because I already output that consciousness and they're just carrying it back to me. In the same way that I'm not supposed to hold on to it. If I'm so afraid that that money's going to run out. So if I have a belief that there's a limited supply of money, if I have a belief that I'm going to run out when I go to spend things, so I hesitate to spend money on certain things, or I hesitate to do certain trips or whatever because I'm afraid I'm going to tank my income.
Yeah.
The fear in that is the program that's running within you that's inhibiting that flow of money and allowing that to grow, which is you believe that if you run out, you're going to be homeless on the street, you're not going to have food, you're going to die. That's the child wound in there. That's the way that they think, just black and white. Yeah. When you start to go into that fear and you say, oh, I have reason to be afraid of being homeless and on the street without any food. There's a reason to be afraid of that. No wonder I'm afraid of that. However, is it actually true that I would ever be on the street homeless without food? No. I have friends, I have family, someone will come in somewhere because they always have. You know, something has always showed up to support me in one capacity or another.
Yeah, or even just having a healthy, somewhat healthy brain and able-bodied, you can get a lot.
Something.
You can figure something out.
It's so easy to get something. And the reason I say it is that your belief is that it is the black and white of death. You know? So when you get into that child consciousness and you sit in it as an adult, meaning you process it with the logic of the adult looking at that child consciousness, you can realize, oh, wait, that's never going to happen. I have no reason to be afraid of running out. Is it actually true that I will ever run out? No. It's true that is it true that I have a limited supply? Well, no. The gap between how much money I make, let's keep the numbers simple. There's people out there that make billions of dollars a year. There's people who make millions of dollars a year. If you only make $2,000 a month, the gap between how much money you make and $100,000 or $1 million is such a vast gap that to you, that's practically unlimited money, right? And so if you can start to look at that story and you can start to say, oh, well, there is an unlimited supply as far as I'm concerned. These people are tapping into it just fine. The only reason I haven't is because I have this belief that underlies my actions that says there's a limited supply. Yeah. And that when I ask for money, I'm taking from somebody.
It's like the abundance mindset versus the scarcity mindset.
Yeah. And so it starts to shift a lot of the ways that you interact, so that when somebody, has been talking about money issues and they come to pay you, you no longer take their power away by saying, well, if you can't afford it, I don't want you to do that right now. Yeah. You allow them to do it because you realize that you channeled your consciousness to bring that money to you. You also are giving them a really strong catalyst to step up. Because if that catalyst is not painful enough when they exchange that money, they're not going to do the work associated with it. Okay. So sometimes you actually need to, if you're not charging enough for your services, a lot of times, you're not creating a painful enough catalyst for that exchange to actually get them to make the changes and shifts within them. Yeah. So you want to balance that equation out. And there's a lot of different ways, whether you're a coach or whether you're just working a day job, there's so many ways now with information products, with all this different stuff online to be making money on the internet in addition to whatever you're doing, and without much time, like selling on Amazon, doing all these different things are so easy to do. Yeah. That if you get out of your own way and you start to ask yourself, why do I want this? Why do I want this money? Is it because I want stability? Is it because I want freedom? Is it because I want these things? How can I feel those feelings in my current life? How can I change my lens so that I realize, wait, I actually have some freedom now. How can I express that freedom? Oh, I actually am pretty stable now. I'm making a consistent income. Yeah. I'm supported. I don't have $1 billion in my account, but do I need that to feel this? And so start to feel it, and then figure out.
Money comes.
And then the money comes because the money comes to support the identity. It doesn't create the identity. And if you can show up in the identity you want to be, so if you want to be that Netflix special comedian, you want to be showing up now with that intention and with that energy and with that persona of someone who
I would need to show up in a wheelchair too, probably
because
that's oh, I guess I'm black, so they'll cut.
That seems to work better for now.
For America's Got Talent. I was gonna sign up for that, and I was like, my story's not sad enough to even, to move on
to get you on this, to get you on the stage.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, but there's some truth to that. Too. But part of it is the identity that you create in being able to show up in that identity without someone outside of you validating you in it. And that's initially really, really scary for people because we've been so programmed to have people, our whole lives. And I don't know if I said this on the video earlier, but, everyone's looking at us. Our parents are looking at us. Our teachers are looking at us. Our coaches are looking at us. Our friends are looking at us. They're saying, I want to feel good when I look at you. And they say, I want you to be the person I want you to be so that I feel good when I'm looking at you.
Yeah.
And so you imprint that and you imprint that and you imprint
and you start picking up shit that doesn't serve you. And it's just, it's akin to fucking hell.
Yeah.
If you go too far down the line, I mean, I feel like could be a cause of like suicide. And shit. I'm speculating here, but
absolutely
you know what I'm saying? Like I went down that road myself, and I've mentioned this a few times on the podcast, but with the job I got, I was like, well, I can't be myself. I can't be goofy. And I mean, it's like you start creating these stories, like you said, and you start acting in a way because secretly, or not secretly, but subconsciously, we don't want to be alone and we want to be a part of the group.
That. And so it's interesting when you start to see those things, those threads in your life, and you're like,
and then that's how you pull yourself out of that.
You do. And you have to start to see those threads and then be able to see it from, 10 feet away instead of in it, and being able to then, even just with your work, you're like, oh, well, I'm supposed to be like, straight faced and professional when I'm at work. And it's like, okay, who told me to do that? Look how many people are miserable and unhealthy in those places. Yeah. If all I brought was a smile, the transformations that could
this last year, I've really started acting like myself, and lo and behold, making more sales than ever. My interactions I'm not even really nervous going to talk to people anymore.
Yeah, it changes
like I
everything.
Used to be like.
Because you're like, well, they like me, and it's like, who cares?
Who cares?
Just the people who, when you show up this way, in the way that your soul is asking you to show up, and that's never it, right? We're always peeling new layers, So you might this might be a better, more powerful, empowered version of you now, but as you go through the next year, more stuff will strip away and more clarity will come, and you'll keep refining how you show up. Comedy
has made me, because as I've realized, the more authentic you are, the harder the laughs you get. So that's been my North Star for what really is mine, and what have I picked up that's not serving me. I could tell when social interactions, it's made me a little bit more hyper aware about that. Yeah. So
it's really cool because I took a laughter class in college that was awesome.
A laughter class?
A laughter class. What and it was the science of laughter. And it was really really a tough class actually. Just because my professor gave me 50 out of 100 on every one of my essays. And I still got an A in the class because the final exams were to demonstrate that we understood the material. So we did create like a puppet show.
Did you go in front of the class like, ha 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 ha?
No, it was actually really intelligent about, incongruity and how truth creates humor. And, there's just a lot of stuff that was really like, it was a
that sounds super interesting.
It was a really fascinating class that like now when cause I worked out in LA, so I did script rewrites and story notes for a lot of comedies actually. And so I did a lot of work in analyzing not just the rhythm of the edits for how the comic timing works, but the writing and how the incongruity shows up and whether that's true for the character, and understanding, just because it's a funny line, it won't come across funny if it's not a truth for that character or for you, when you're telling a joke, if it's not, if you're not in, even look at clowning. So if you look at clowning, when somebody puts on a goofy character of some kind, the mistakes that clown makes are true for the character of that clown, and that's why it's funny. Yeah. If you're a clown who makes balloon animals and you keep having, the comedy would come from the weird balloon animals that you make that are incongruent from what you would expect.
Yeah.
But you're trying to create humor because someone keeps sweeping a broom across your feet. It's not going to play because the truth of the character is the balloon animals, not the weird sweeping that came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And so there's truths to things that you can pick up that allow you to be more specific in your writing to create humor intentionally by just knowing the formula.
I agree. I'm working that. I'm with my race humor. So because growing up in New York, like the greater New York area, I was aware of like different subcultures, not just like white, black. Like it wasn't until I moved to the South that it was like, it's pretty much white, black, and like Mexican. And then there's like pockets of other cultures around. But in New York, there's a difference between the Albanians and the Irish and the Italians.
Right.
And you know, like, there's a difference. So you get to notice, I get to notice that. So like, I'm trying to bring that in, or like the different types of white people, the WASP, the rednecks, right. And that's like being able to drill down even further doesn't make it so like, well, white people do this and black people do that. Like,
and you can connect with people better because you start to tell a story that they relate to, and then you switch it, and it allows them to have, you set up their expectations in some way, and then you can guide them through that, and you can start to be more agile with how you can get your audience to react to what's coming up in different ways, just by playing with truth, because that's effectively what you're doing, is you're finding a truth that is either true for them or not true for them, and then distorting it in a way that they can relate to it. And one of the best parts is like finding something that's, when you match that duality of life, like the whole it is and it isn't, where like it's something that's true for you, but it's so true for you that it's true for a certain group of people. It's like it's a human thing that we go through. So, and that's why it's funny. That's one of the, and it's neat to see how those kinds of things evolve. That laughter class was really interesting just because it the learning of humor wasn't funny. Learning how to do that
sounds like the most unfunny thing. One of the most unfunny things I can think of. But it's still interesting. It's like I would still go to that class to see what's up. Like,
well, the crazy thing is, funny is still funny, even though I know why it was funny.
Yeah.
There's certain things that when you like magic tricks, if you know how it's done, it's no longer a cool illusion. It's impressive the first time you see it, but if you know how they do the sleight of hand, if you know where they're hiding the stuff, it's no longer as impressive as when you saw it the first time. Whereas if I know how humor works and I understand the mechanisms that comedian used when they were writing that stuff out and the way that they used their timing to create that moment, it's still funny because it's the information contained in it, not the how. Whereas other things are effective only because of the how.
Yeah, I would say with certain things that could be true. There definitely are some that after the first time, especially if it's very novel, because the first time you hear something for the first time and it makes you laugh, like you have no choice but to laugh. Yeah. The next time, now you're introduced to that style of humor, so now you kind of get the pattern. But So
and there's always that, it's the surprise element. When you have incongruity is kind of how that surprise works. Is you're leading them down one path, and then the punchline, let's say, is a completely different path, but still fits on the top of it.
Yeah, a little misdirect and all that.
Yeah, and so those incongruity moments only work the first time. Because you can use that formula many times with different types of material, but the initial joke, they know the path. And so now it doesn't work to flip them around because they know you're flipping them around.
It loses its intensity. What do you think about the most?
For me personally, I'm always focusing on how can I most potently, right now especially, how can I most potently help my clients get out of their own way? Because one of the things that
Are you out of your own way?
I am always, I think all the time I spend more time out of my way than I do in my way now.
Okay. I like that answer.
I would say there's always something where there's new lessons for me to learn, where I will have a time where I need to process. Yeah. And a time where I need to take whatever this input was and translate what it's teaching me and how to show up in spite of that.
Yeah. It's like sometimes you're out of your own way, but then if you don't pay attention, you just get in your own way again. Yeah. And you're like, oh shit, I'm in my own way.
And I tend to stay in alignment now a good majority of the time because I've really I've noticed what it feels like when I'm out of that alignment, when I'm out of that flow.
Yeah.
And so as I've gotten better at noticing that, I get more agile at coming back into center. And so the analogy I give people about this, like even just about our emotions and the things that we feel, is our life is a bowling lane and the pins are our goal. And we can put the pins anywhere we want in our life. We don't have to promise to keep the pins in the same place tomorrow that we had them today.
Okay.
And that's important to remember, because when people are making choices, they're so afraid of making choices because they feel those choices are permanent. And there's no such thing as a permanent choice. Choices are just information. And so when we're looking at, and when we get more information, we can make new choices.
Yeah.
And so what I look at when we look at that bowling alley, we have the guardrails up. And the guardrails are our emotions. And so when we roll that ball down, we're going towards our goal all the time. We're always going there, whether we realize it or not, whether we're depressed or whether we're happy, we're always being pushed towards that. Now, when we bump off that gutter, it's supposed to bring us right back into alignment. But a lot of people hit that gutter and they bounce off the gutter and they bounce off the gutter. They're like, look at this gutter, bounce off the gutter. And they just keep sitting in that emotion instead of feeling it. We just like when what I teach people first is, one, to give themselves permission to feel what they're feeling. And then I teach them how to sit with it. Because when you actually give yourself permission to feel what you're feeling, whether it's fear or it's anxiety or it's depression or it's whatever the committee is talking in your head, telling you things you don't want to hear. If you literally sit with it and just find it in your body, so you use your mind's eye, whatever resonates with you, whatever language that resonates with you. Like when you have anxiety, we usually feel it here. We usually feel it in our throat somewhere. There's a pressure. And other things we'll feel in different parts of our body. Recognize that part first. And then sit and look at it without telling it to leave, without telling it to be something that it's not, without saying, I'm not supposed to feel this. Look at it. And if all you do is look at it, it will naturally dissolve, because that's all it wants. It wants to be acknowledged. And so when you start to see and feel that emotion intentionally by looking at those different places that you're feeling those energies, they dissolve. And now you can get right back into work instead of bouncing off of that forever and ever and having a whole day where you're feeling shadowy.
Yeah.
And so being able to navigate that with more, because that literally takes 30 seconds. But people spend so much time going to the gym to dissipate it and, having sex to dissipate it, all these different things that they do unconsciously. So if you do those things, absolutely do them intentionally, knowing that I don't have time, I don't have an ability to sit with this right now. I'm going to dissipate it for now and come back to it later. But at least you know that. Yeah. Because if you're doing it on autopilot, it's like taking a beach ball and pushing it under the water. And then it's just going to keep coming back up to the surface.
Autopilot is a motherfucker, man. Like that, the amount of people I've heard say autopilot or like, hey man, I just went through this point in my life where I was in autopilot. Like just even just recognizing the autopilot. That's really the first step. Is just like
it is, and it really is just recognizing that you're feeling fear, or you're feeling anxiety, or you're telling story. You have this committee that's saying you're not good enough, or you're whatever the messages that people are getting. And people are having this stuff come up all the time right now with just the energies of the planet are changing right now, and people are noticing it. Things are catching on fire because there's a death and rebirth process happening where we're losing our old identities and having to show up in our truer capacities. We're not able to get away with the same old patterns and things that we've been living through up till this point.
Yeah.
And so when we look at this mechanism of this bowling alley and we're bouncing off of these guardrails, the faster we can react to this, the faster we can become agile at navigating our reality and clearer at what we're actually outputting and what we're creating. Because if we keep trying to go to work and we keep feeling the same emotion, it's telling us something that we're not listening to. And so sometimes it's that it has to do with the persona with which we are showing up. So, if you're working at an art studio, and you're working for somebody else at this art studio and you're teaching classes and you hate being there because your boss micromanages you all the time, you're losing your opportunity in that place to show up as the artist you're actually wanting to be. If you're wanting to be that art teacher or sell your art or do these things, and you're living in a diminished version of yourself because you don't like being there, you're missing an opportunity to express yourself and showcase what you can do in a couple of different ways. So imagine if you showed up to that art studio and you said, how can I add so much value to this art studio? And in the process, test drive the things that I want to do on someone else's dime. and be able to add value to them and then try these things and come in not just as a slave, but as someone who is proactively trying to create something of value.
So it sounds like a perspective shift.
Absolutely. That's all it is.
Yeah,
it's a lens
nice.
shift. And being able to do that allows them to say, oh, wait, it wasn't actually the job I'm running from. It was me. It was because I was not showing up in this capacity.
Dude, that's so funny you say that because I talk about like picking up a hobby for that. It's like I told my buddy was like having he used to draw. He was a great, like he used to, sketch on paper. And he was like, man, I want to get back to drawing. He's like, I was like, you should do it, man. He's like, well, I can't quit my job. He thought I quit my job to do comedy. Yeah. I'm like, nah, dude, I do this as an extra thing. I was like, you might realize that you don't hate your job. You just didn't have a way, like you said, to express yourself. Yeah. So now you're coming in with that, found my hobby energy into work. And now all of a sudden the promotion you wanted or the interactions that you're wanting are starting to happen. Like shit like that.
And exactly. And it's like, I've said this so many times already that our identity is what the universe supports. It's not what we want. It's not what we're asking for. It's not, the things that we're saying. It's the identity that we hold, and then the universe supports that identity. And so if you can start to notice where you are sacrificing yourself, because if you're not happy somewhere, that has nothing to do with where you are. It has to do with the story you're telling about where you are. And so or the story you're telling about how you're treated, or the story you're telling about all these things, it has nothing to do with that. They're just mirroring back to you your subconscious output. And so if you can recognize that and take ownership of it, you're giving yourself a lot of power back, because now you're not letting yourself be at the whims of these people or the universe or all these things. You're proactively taking information from your reality, saying, is this in alignment with what I want? Yes or no? If it's not, I can change something. And now this thing shifts, and now I see this shift, and I can continue to refine who I am so that the way I feel in my world matches with the way I want to feel. And then you use those guidelines as a way to get you into that way of navigating.
So if somebody's watching this and they're like, man, I fuck with this dude hard, where can I find them?
Best place to find me is, like I said, through my Instagram, Mintzflow, Mintzflow. From there's some links you can read. I have a whole bunch of videos that people can watch. If this stuff is like just scratch the surface of some of the things that I talk about. So if somebody was like, oh, I'd really like to dig into some of that relationship stuff, or I'd like to dig into some of that money stuff, or I'd like to, because I teach a lot, I have a lot of movement programs for helping people fix their hips and shoulders and posture and things that have really, because I've broken my back, I've torn my bicep, I've injured all kinds of stuff. So I figured out how to fix a lot of those things. So I have programs for that. All of those are linked to on my Instagram. I do a Q&A on Instagram. It's been awesome. People love it. So I am working on digitizing like 3,000 Q&As right now, to have it in a database for people to be able to search and get insights and stuff for. But people interact and they ask tough questions. So they ask real questions about this kind of stuff, working on their money beliefs, working on their relationship stuff, working on how they can show up better in the world, and working on their soul purpose, like all of these different pieces. They can interact with me that way. It's a great way to work with me to see how you resonate with that information. And then I have my group mentorship that I do now. So people can, like I said, we get together in a group every once or twice a week. It's online. It's via Zoom. They're all recorded. So if you miss the chat, you can watch it later. And each of them is relatively themed, but I interact with everybody. So, if someone is, if we're doing money, then I'm specifically digging into somebody's money programs and the things that are coming up, and they're interactive, and we're working on digging into their belief patterns.
Is that when they give you $1 million?
Eventually. It's not quite that. No, this is actually one of my more affordable offerings compared to some of my other coaching. It's $500 a month. Which is much more affordable than some of my other coaching that I do, like one-on-one and whatever.
Do you have low-income scholarships for people that maybe don't have?
I have worked with people on different things. So some of the folks who've bought some of my other products and things, or have wanted to support.
You have a lot of good free information on your site, too.
Tremendous amount of free information. And that's kind of what I do for those folks is really like my Q&A and the free videos and things that I already have out there. It's a like somebody could spend the next 6 months and still have stuff to go through just from that content. So there's really a lot of stuff that's there already to really help people. I mean, people just from my Q&As, people have tell me probably 3 to 5 times every single day how much these messages have changed their life for the better. So it's really been transformative for a lot of people, really rewarding for me also, just to kind of be able to interact with people in that way. And then being able to do the mentorship group is really nice, just because it gives me a way to do face-to-face stuff, even if it's digital, and be able to communicate with folks and build better relationships. So for these retreats and things that I'm doing throughout the year, that I can just be building relationships ongoing, because there's something really fun about actually having real life interaction on some level with the digital people that you meet. There's a lot of fun with it.
You create a community and stuff. So
and I had mentioned, the Emptiness Project and some of that stuff that I'm doing later this year. That is just a phenomenal trip. And there's one that we're doing in July in Peru, and I think registration for that's going to open in probably the next 4 days, actually, next couple of days.
Okay.
There's another one in Joshua Tree at the end of the year. So the one in Peru and Joshua Tree are slightly different. The one in Joshua Tree is what I did last year, and I facilitated that. I guided people through some Bufo ceremonies. I did color puncture with everybody that was there.
So it's essentially like a retreat for people to like heal and stuff.
Even beyond that, we're out in the wilderness with a bunch of people who are given an opportunity to be themselves by themselves in a group that's also doing that same thing. And so what happened was, it's a strange concept.
No, I get it though.
It's a really strange concept, and it's really hard to describe except when you're there. And what happened was, after the first couple of days of just these types of interactions, and we're doing mushrooms, and we're doing San Pedro and some other things that allow us to open up a little bit more. And we're out scrambling on all the boulders and climbing. It was a bunch of movement people generally. So it's a lot of movement culture type folks. But what happened was, throughout those next couple of days, is like people just started to flourish and come out of their shell, and just like their parts of their personalities that they always hid and were afraid to kind of show up in. 25 people started to show up. And so you create these bonds and these friendships and these interactions, and you feel like you knew these people for lifetimes. So you just really connect, and just the connections that have stayed with everybody. And I mean, just the other day, this was months ago that we went, and people are still sending messages and making posts about this trip because of how life-changing and powerful it was. There was not a single person who went on that trip that said it wasn't not only life-changing, but it was the best week they've ever had in their entire life. And I would absolutely agree with it. Just the way that worked.
There you have it, Fred heads. If you want the best fucking week of your entire life, hit this man up. All right? If you're looking for alternative modalities to figure yourself out or reorient yourself in this world, if you like what you heard, hit him up. Ryan, what do you got? 15 seconds to like boil your message down. You got 15 seconds to say whatever you want to the Fred heads.
Gotcha.
AKA Freddy Knights. That's a play on the Jedi Knights. Because there's some dark forces out there, and we got to take these motherfuckers out. You know what I'm saying?
And that's exactly right. We do have dark forces, and part of this game is to recognize that within us we have these different narratives, these different energies, these light energies and these dark energies, and these things that are our preference and things that are not our preference. And by working through that, we can begin to show up in our fullest capacity and interact with greater relationships in our life.
Boom. Guys, subscribe, rate, and review to the FredTalk podcast and to the YouTube channel. It's not released yet. It's going to be released February 1st. It's either going to be Freddy Valoy, the Freddy Valoy show, or the Freddy Valoy. I don't know. Either way, subscribe to the channel. The podcasts are going to be under there. Sketches. Francisco's going to be making a bunch of appearances. I'm going to do blogs and all that stuff. So stay on the lookout. One video coming a week. Ryan, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bro, that was fucking...
That was good.
That was fun, man.
Yeah. That was fun. Good chat.
Whew.